right, this is the regular April 2020 meeting of the Dane County School District 51 Board of Trustees. I'll call the meeting to order and ask Madam Clerk to call the roll.
Trustee Green? Here. Trustee Clayton?
Here.
Trustee Stone?
Here.
Trustee Lorna?
Here.
And Trustee Rourke?
Here. All members of the board are present, so I will declare that there is a quorum, and we now need to approve the agenda. Is there any question about the agenda before we move to approve it? I'll entertain then a motion for approval of the agenda as drafted.
I move we approve today's agenda.
I'll second.
There is a second. Any discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. The next matter is the consideration of the minutes. Has everyone received a copy of those minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any comments, questions, or adjustments to those?
None.
No.
Then I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
I move we approve the minutes as drafted.
I second.
And Vice Chairman Green seconds. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And
Aye.
opposed? Have a chair votes with the ayes.
Excuse me, Chairman Rourke.
So move
you
now
skipped-
to. Pardon me?
We skipped
I'll
item
get,
C
yeah, I'm
under the
going to get
public
back to
order.
the school report.
Okay, sorry about that.
All right, so are we ready to go with the school report? I know there's going to be a video.
Yes, I can play the video whenever we need to.
Great.
Did you want an introduction to it? This is the report from Silver Creek High School. It was created by one of the students there as a part of his learning project. With that, Ben, you can play the video.
Regulation skills have impacted students' ability to engage in school. Some students feel so overwhelmed to the point where they feel like they can't even be here anymore. Silver Creek is really unique in the fact that we can have individual relationships with every single student in this school. They feel safer here, they feel like they can trust us because there's that relationship built. If a student is struggling with something like an anxiety attack in the middle of the day, really just sitting for 30 to 60 seconds sometimes and focusing on a part of the body that feels pleasant or neutral can be such a quick way of getting back into that place where you feel okay again. And sensing into those places of well-being can actually help us engage with our peers in a healthy way. When we're feeling depressed or we're feeling anxious, talking things out can be very helpful. The sense of comfort and safety that community brings people here, it allows them to learn in a safer environment where their anxiety is not quite as high. Some students come here and they haven't been a part of a community before. They don't know what that's like. So being a part of something where there's peers around you who care and will often keep each other accountable for how they behave fosters these really deep relationships. So I think that's how the social emotional community piece of Silver Creek is impacting the educational piece. When you see students who are really trying and they're learning new skills and then they're using them and seeing results, it just fills you up. Some people just want to be heard and they want to be seen. Sometimes they don't feel that way when they're in a bigger classroom environment. Some students need something different. knowing that really difficult things can happen can make you feel like you want to give up on something, and yet you have the skills to get through that time, and it's going to be okay. And you've done hard things before, so you can do them again.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was very moving. All right, are we back in session?
Yeah.
The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of monthly financial reports and payments of bills. Has everybody received that report?
Yes.
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 Questions, comments about that?
I would just say that I had a few things I had questions on, and I talked to Brian about them, and everything looked fine. So I don't have anything that we need to go over in the meeting.
Trustee Green?
I don't have any questions.
Trustee Clayton?
None.
Trustee Lorna?
Same, I don't have any questions at this point, thanks.
There being no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to accept the financial reports and the payment of bills.
I move we accept the financial reports and the payment of bills.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. The monthly financial reports and payment of bills then is accepted. The next item is the consideration of personnel exiting and entering. Dr. Holmes, do you want to take that up?
The only one that I would want to point out on that particular report is there is one person who is working on an alternate authorization, which is the way Idaho helps people get certified in the area in which they are teaching. They have to have a college degree to begin, but then they can get the certification in the area they have. So your approval tonight of hiring that person will also be approval to the state board for that person to work on alternate authorization. That's the only comment I have.
And so what, if anything, do we need to do at this time?
Just vote to approve it because there are certified staff on it. So a vote to accept the report as is or not.
All right, do I have a motion to that effect?
I move we approve the consideration of personnel exiting and entering.
I second.
It has been seconded. Any discussion?
Aye.
Go ahead. Trustee Stone, did you have a comment?
I do. I just wanted to say that I confirmed with our HR director, Brooke, that she intends to do exit interviews with everyone like we discussed. So that's great.
Any other comments or questions?
I'd just like to thank for the note that on the staff that are retiring, to know that retirement versus resignation. That's helpful to know for me.
Great. Any further discussion?
I just like to say that one last comment that we'll miss them all. We'll miss them all, and we appreciate all their long, hard work here. So thank you to all of them.
Great. Any further discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? Ayes then have it. Chair votes with the ayes, and that matter is approved. We do have the next item, which is appointment of the clerk. As I think you all know, after our search and our interviews, we have selected Vicki Pitcairn as clerk of the board. Is there any question or comment about that nomination?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, there being none, I will entertain a motion to appoint Vicki Pitcairn as the clerk of the board for the remainder of this calendar year. Technically, every year we reappoint the clerk. So this will be an appointment up to and including the organizational meeting in 2021.
I move that we
Some-
appoint Vicki Pitcairn as the board clerk, Lane County School Board of Trustees for the remaining year.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the appointment of Vicki Pitcairn as clerk of the board signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the ayes have it. Vicki Pitcairn is officially appointed as clerk of the board. We have down again public comment procedure. Since we have moved to this format, we are no longer taking comments during the course of the meeting, but we do have a process for anyone who cares to do so to submit by email to the board clerk any comments. Madam Clerk, I did see one. How many of those did we receive?
The total amount of emails, I would say there were about 15 total.
Okay. Has everybody had an opportunity to see those?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't. I can take a look right now.
Any comments on the comments? All right, Madam Clerk, if you'll make sure that those are printed out and made part of the record for this meeting, please. Now, on the action agenda, the consideration of academic programming in every format. Again, Dr. Holmes, if you would take that up and explain it to us, please.
Okay. Couple different things under there. One is confirming the last day of school for students will be May 22nd as originally published on the calendar. That there will not be an extension of school or making an extension of school. The second piece that is on there is the waiver request that will be signed by Chairman Rourke and sent to the state board if it is approved tonight for the 2 weeks that we close schools and close buildings to people the week before and after spring break when there was no instruction being provided because we were all sheltered in place. And then the last one is just an update on the Cary internet service has been described. Right now, as we get to my report later, I'll give you more update on how we are doing on getting kids connected. But right now, the primary way of getting kids connected in Cary is through SafeLink. There is a proposal for Blue Mesh that would like to come into the area and provide internet services, high-speed internet services. They need our help in doing that. However, as you can read in the email that I put in the memo, there are no timelines on them because they would have to order the equipment, which they say is not in stock right now. It'll take some time to get it to us. They'll have to configure it and install it. I would promise that it would be up and running before the end of the school year. However, if you provide us guidance, we will go ahead and work with them so that there is another option in Cary in the future, because we are hoping that with your night closing school on the 22nd, you will also include the option of kids keeping the front for the summer so that we can try to mitigate the learning regression of 5 months with 5 months time period of no face-to-face instruction for our kids.
So I believe, Dr. Holmes, that there are actually 3 matters there
Correct.
the board needs to approve. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Let's begin then with the closure issues. I earlier today, through the board clerk, submitted for the board's consideration resolution 2020-3, which would be in our order closing schools through the end of this school year and continuing for that period of time. So that we can discuss it, I will entertain a motion to adopt that resolution.
I move we adopt that resolution.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, please.
So the State Board of Education has actually shut down schools through the end of their school years right now. So my understanding is it's more of a formality than a decision that we're making. Is that correct?
Well, the board met yesterday. That is the State Board of Education. And while they did extend their order through the remainder of the year, they've opened the possibility that under special circumstances, which circumstances they have not articulated, we might be able, or any school district might be able to reopen. That would require approvals from authorities other than the State Board of Education. So yes, as things stand right now, the State Board has ordered all schools closed. We understand that they are going to meet tomorrow to refine what it is they're talking about in terms of conditions, which we would be permitted to open the schools at some later date. We are in a position right now where there's, Dr. Holmes, 6.5 weeks left, something like that.
Right. And their criteria that they set a week ago when they did that was, they don't have all the details in there, but they said that you would, the shelter-in-place orders would have to be lifted, and the local public health department would have to occur. So we know at least that much would have to occur, and then they're supposed to take the rest of the criteria later this week, as Chairman Work said.
And I believe
Since this resolution did not get posted in board docs for the public to see, could I suggest somebody read it, and then we'll get it, they'll send it to you and get it posted in board docs tomorrow.
You cut out a little bit there, Dr. Holmes. Could you repeat that, please?
The resolution did not get posted in board docs, so the public has not had an opportunity to see it, so I think maybe somebody should read it.
I have it up. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, I wrote it. Can you read it?
Sure. Blaine County School District number 61, Resolution 2023. A resolution of the Board of Trustees of Blaine County School District number 61, approving and authorizing the closure of all schools within the district and all buildings owned and operated by the school district from the date of adoption of this resolution through the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. Can everybody hear me? Are we doing okay?
Yes.
Great.
Whereas Blaine County, Idaho is currently experiencing a serious outbreak of COVID-19 caused by the coronavirus, and whereas the Blaine County School District number 61 encompasses all of Blaine County, and whereas on March 14th, 2020, the chairman of the Blaine County School District Board of Trustees and district superintendent, having learned that a person with a connection to one of the schools in said district had tested positive for the coronavirus, approved and ordered an immediate closure of all district schools and buildings, effective March 16th, 2020, which order was ratified by the Board of Trustees at a special meeting held March 30, 2020. And whereas the closure was initially scheduled to remain in effect until April 6, 2020, and whereas subsequent to the closure of all schools in the Blaine County School District, the Idaho Board of Education declared a soft closure of all schools in the state of Idaho on March 23, 2020, to remain in effect until April 20, 2020, pending further order of that board. And whereas on March 25, 2020, the governor of the state of Idaho, the Honorable Brad Little, issued an isolation or home shelter order covering the entire state, severely restricting public gatherings, business activity, and transportation to remain in effect for 21 days pending further order. And whereas on April 6, 2020, the Idaho Board of Education extended its soft closure of public school buildings to the end of the academic year with a provision for reopening of such buildings if conditions not yet specified are met. And whereas the governor has indicated that he will likely extend his home isolation order beyond April 20, And whereas the Blaine County School District has now commenced its distance learning plan and all teachers have developed content to accommodate the plan, and a transition back to a classroom learning model would create additional burdens on teachers and administrators alike and would further disrupt the education of the district students. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of Blaine County, Idaho that 1, the closure of all district schools from this date through the end of the school year is hereby approved and ordered. 2, issue related to graduation activities for high school seniors and potential changes to grading practices for the current semester are currently being studied, and the board will make decisions regarding those issues at the earliest practicable time.
All right. We do have a motion to approve in a second, so discussion at this time?
How do you raise your hand? Like this? I have some discussion.
All right. Trustee Clayton.
First, I'd like to thank Dr. Holmes, the admin staff, all the building administration, and all the teachers and other staff for what I would consider a pretty rapid response to a significant curveball. And the fact that we are underway, we have Chromebooks out, we have a lot of resources put in place, and pretty much a significant shift in paradigm of educational delivery that no one could have anticipated. You know, you read some things about where's the proper disaster planning and that kind of thing. This is a disaster beyond anyone's idea of magnitude as far as even the world goes. So the work that was done by our staff, I'm very pleased with, very happy with, and just want to applaud them for their efforts and their work, because kids are engaged in the process of education from a different platform that will probably be valuable for them in their lifetime. I appreciate the resolution, and I appreciate sticking with the distance learning through the end of the year, because the time and effort that went into that transition, I was very reticent to I was really, actually would have liked to seen us go back to classroom learning, but it's impossible. And with the work and effort that's been put in, I think that it's imperative for us to continue and stay the course on that, because to pull that out would be really unfair to all of the staff who put their time and effort into creating this platform. And then really that's all I had to say on that. I think that it is an amazing project and an amazing thing, and I'm really curious to the outcome. You know, as we move forward, it was interesting to hear Dr. Holmes speak of regression mitigation, because we're going to experience severe regression because we are losing a high degree of contact, losing a huge chunk of time, particularly in the younger ages, elementary ages. I mean, it's a big part of their life when they're out 5 months. And so what I would like to see moving forward is exactly what that regression mitigation would be. And that's the next step on, I think, our next big obligation to this community and the students in the community. So there, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Clayton. Discussion, comment? There being none, I'll call the question for the approval of Blaine County School District number 61. Resolution 2020. Pardon me?
Can I make another comment? I wonder if the resolution should also have a whereas about the Board of Education saying that it was closing all schools. That seems like one of the more critical, maybe, paragraphs that needs to be in there. Or do you think that doesn't pertain?
We don't really know what that means until tomorrow.
Oh.
And we may not even know then.
Okay, great. But never mind on that. Or did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation? Are you good?
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's getting, I don't have the best. So I do have some concerns, but I think I'm just not sure when to bring them up at this point. One, I do think it's incredibly important that we keep Chromebooks with our kids all summer long and helping engage. Though I also think it's important how we monitor those, and obviously, hopefully we have a plan in place on how we're getting them back, especially from our seniors who are leaving at the end of the school year. And then also, just with that being said, I kind of lost my train of thought, but essentially, from what I understand, there's a lot of kids that still don't have their Chromebooks, and so that's something I've communicated with a little bit, but I know that there's some families at Alturas that still don't, and I think that that's a really big miss on our part, and how how do we get those to those kids? Because now it has been, however many more weeks, and we're just missing an opportunity to be reaching our kids.
We're going to take that up as a separate issue in just a moment. Trustees. Any further discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of adopting the resolution will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it. That resolution is adopted. Second matter we need to take up under this topic is the question of the Chromebooks, and I believe the request that we permit the students to keep those Chromebooks over the course of the summer for whatever educational purposes they may be able to use them for. Dr. Holmes, do you want to elaborate just a little bit on what that plan would be?
Correct. Okay. We are requesting that Chromebooks be allowed to be maintained by the students over the summer. If that is approved, then we will begin working on summer programming for the students so that they won't have as much contact as they're having right now with their teacher, but they will have directions and things that they can do over the summer to help mitigate the regression in their learning. And it's also the efforts that are happening right now to get kids connected to the internet. We want to take full advantage of that and not just shut it down 2 months after we get it all done, but rather keep it going through the end of August. And then to Trustee Lorna's question, there's also in the works a plan for how we would have students return to school toward the end of the year for a staggered time slots, kind of like they've been picking up the Chromebooks, to clean out their lockers, their desks, to get their possessions that are still there. And then lastly, we would request that if the shelter-in-place order is lifted by then, that we allow all teachers to return for those last 3 teacher work days so that we can finish buttoning up buildings for the summer. So there's 3 parts. Chromebooks, once that's staying there, then we'll push ahead on the plan. Second, getting things back to kids, plus collecting the seniors' Chromebooks, and then letting staff return to the building that last week in order to close things up.
So basically, what we need approval for, what you need approval for, is letting the students, other than the seniors, retain those Chromebooks over the course of the summer.
That's correct.
So let's take that issue up. Would someone like to make a motion approving that proposal?
I move we let students keep the Chromebooks that they've checked out over the summer, except for students that are leaving the district, either as seniors or because they're moving.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
I have a couple of questions.
Please, go ahead.
I just heard about school learning. I already have heard some feedback of different forms that our children are receiving curriculum. Like maybe we're not all aligned. Someone in 3rd grade is getting 5 or 6 hours of a school work a day, while their senior is only getting 2 hours. I've just heard a lot of feedback on, where our alignment is, or a 3rd grader and, Carrie versus a 3rd grader and Haley in. So is there going to be some alignment coming together in regards to curriculum between schools or principals or teachers, especially when it comes to summer school?
Dr. Holmes, I'll let you answer that.
Yes, and there should be some alignment now. However, I will tell you that each school is different all the time. And we have some people who think teachers give too much homework, some who think they don't give enough. But the alignment comes in that district-wide, we have identified the essential standards at each grade level that students are supposed to be learning. That's the outcome that each school is held accountable for. then each school and each teacher has leeway in how they work on that. We did in our learning continuity plan recommend that students have no more than 4 hours a day of instruction, and we even asked our secondary teachers to stagger that. So if you're an odd period class, you're pushing out things on odd numbered days. If you're an even period class, you're pushing things out on even numbered days, because we know it can be overwhelming when you're trying to just do it online, and overwhelming to the parents as well, who are dealing with multiple kids trying to use the internet. If there are specific concerns that one child or a parent is feeling totally overwhelmed, I would ask that they would please reach out to the teacher. And if they don't get the answers they need there, then reach out to the principal. This would be just like any normal school time. If you have concerns about what your child is being asked to do, start with the teacher. If you don't get satisfaction there, go to the principal. If you don't get satisfaction there, then come to me. But we do allow a lot of variability in how they teach to those essential standards. The alignment is what they're expected to teach and how the kids are expected to master it.
Thank you for that. So then we were talking about the 4 hours a day of education. So, and then we're talking about summer school. Is that going to be applied to all students? And if that's the case, will it still be 4 hours a day, especially while they have the Chromebooks? Or are we going to be lowering those hours, or what will that look like?
I would assume that the hours will lower for summer, and I assume that we will target specific students based on where they are in their learning. Of course, any child would have the option, but we'll specifically target some of those students that we know when they left us on March 16th were working below level.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one. So Trustee Larna brought up the summer school. That's not clear to me in any of this documentation what she's referring to. Could somebody bring me some clarity on that?
What we're talking about is if the Chromebooks are allowed to stay with students, then we want to get together a plan for helping prevent learning regression. Now, I'll be very honest that in the past, when we've tried to do summer school in person, we've had a very hard time recruiting staff to do that. However, we're hoping with the fact that we can do this distance learning that we'll have an easier time recruiting some staff to help with that, and that even classroom teachers can give their students a series of things to do, even if they're not connecting with them every single week in the summertime.
So my question is this a proposal, or is this simply something that's being batted around? Where are we staying with that?
It is currently in discussion, because if you approve the Chromebooks all summer tonight, we'll put more energy into it, but we didn't put a lot of energy into it till we knew we had Chromebooks. And connectivity, we're also working on the connectivity issue.
So I have one more question on that, and I know that this is completely far-fetched, but there's those 2 weeks that the teachers didn't work specifically in case we were going to push school out 2 weeks. Is it a possibility that we ask the teachers to be on hand for the students that are needing them throughout the summer for, if they spent 1 day a week for a month out of their summer to help with that?
That is certainly a possibility that the board could ask. I will also say that despite the fact that they were not technically on the clock, there were a lot of them doing an incredible amount of work already.
Yeah, I know.
I don't want people in the community to think they were on vacation during that time.
Chairman Rourke, I have a question,
Yes.
or somewhat of a comment. So tonight, what we are being asked to approve is just the continuation of letting them keep the Chromebooks. We're not approving any curriculum.
That is correct.
Okay.
Trustee Rourke?
Yeah.
I think we need to be very careful of this conversation at this level, because we don't have a proposal for that. We have nothing in mind. This is first news I've got of it. That's why I asked in the earlier part about a regression mitigation strategy. and a plan. Just to bat around summer school with Chromebooks is, I think, really putting a cart before the horse. I really want to see something comprehensive that leads into next year, or how we begin the year next year. We go back to school very early anyways, so let's take advantage of that. I think what we've just voted on is that we are completing the school year as calendared. Everybody's responsibility is as calendared. We're not asking for anything additional. I think there's enough stress and difficulty going on just with this current situation that I think if we can leave the year as it stands and get out of this relatively unscathed, we'll be in great shape. But this next subject is really important, and I believe it really warrants its own agenda item at some point for presentation and discussion on our part.
Well, the only question before the board right now is the question of whether or not we permit the students to retain their Chromebooks across the course of the summer, with the exception of the seniors who would have to turn theirs in.
Correct.
So I would just like to state that I feel like if there's not going to be a curriculum involved, then they're not going to need their Chromebook. Or if there's not going to be any teachers helping them, or if, you know, there's not going to be anything aligned, then there's no point in them having them. Other than, I mean, I know there's going to be parents that help with them individually, but us as a school district, allowing all the kids to say, keep your Chromebooks for the summer, but we don't have anything in line. So I do agree with Rob that maybe we're putting the cart before the horse, and it needs to be kind of aligned together, that especially with the kids that are needing it at this point, or that will be needing it, because there's some kids that won't need their Chromebooks.
Did you want to address that, Dr. Holmes?
Yes, please. While we anticipate, which is in the memo, that if you are letting them keep the Chromebooks, that they will access online learning programs during the summer, I do want to say that one of the greatest inequities for many students this day is access to internet or not. Now, through our are limited in what they can do. There are devices to control where they want to go. However, even if they don't have a teacher guiding them every day, what they can get to are things that are in ISIP, which are reading activities, stories that they can read. They can get to math pieces and those kinds of things. And those are things that oftentimes students with less economic resources in their homes do not have. And it is one of the hurdles that our students face when they walk in the door, is what resources do they have at home versus what they don't have at home. And we are proposing that we make that resource available to every student for the summer, so that they have access to that. And then, of course, we will give them some guidance too, not to the degree that we are right now, but we will give them guidance. And so I think having access to the internet over the summer is one way of bridging that equity gap.
And I think what they have here is 6 weeks of training in how to use it.
Right.
So they'll actually be pretty proficient. And for kids that are motivated, or even the ones who have teachers who are helping kind of prod them in the summer, they'll have at least an opportunity there where they don't currently.
Currently, that's correct.
Well, it would seem to me that even though we will not have teachers necessarily monitoring the work, the teachers certainly could suggest material that could be accessed.
Yep.
And although they will not be personally supervising that work, the work will be available for those students and parents who want the students to have access.
That's correct.
Trustee,
Yeah.
there's just one consideration. I don't know if, because I have elementary students and I'm the only one present on the board that has elementary students, I've been able to view what my kids are doing on their Chromebooks for elementary age groups. And there are a lot of programs that can only be accessed through a Chromebook, like iStation, for instance, that was brought up. And it's usually through that Clever login that students have. There are some different programs that teachers are using right now to teach their kids or teach students that I've been able to access because I have a Clever login. And without that Clever login on their Chromebook, I can't get to those programs without that login specifically on that Chromebook. And I could log into Clever on my personal computer, but having that individual Chromebook for my kids that can sit at that table and work at that computer has been very advantageous for me right now because I have 4 different kids that I'm trying to teach at 4 different levels. So having that Chromebook for them to access right now has been really beneficial. And even if they have it during the summer but don't have any actual assignments or guidance, just letting them access that program and just playing on that program or learning through that program throughout the summer without even any guidance will help them advance, even if it's just a little bit. So there are some advantages to having that Chromebook, even if there isn't any guided instruction.
And I'd just like to add to Rob's point that even if we vote to approve this, I would love to hear what plans are for a summer program, and presumably that would be presented at the next board meeting that we'd have, which I think would be really helpful.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important that they have the Chromebooks. I just want to ensure that we are planning on somewhat of a curriculum and that we have a plan. We're not just saying, here's the Chromebooks for the summer and we don't have a plan in place.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Then I will entertain a motion to permit the Chromebooks to be taken home over the summer.
I think we have a motion, don't
We
we?
do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. And Dr. Holmes, if at the May meeting, if you could have an update
Sure.
as to what kind of guidance we may be able to give the children over the course of the summer, that would be helpful, I think, to the board.
Sure.
The third matter that we need to take up is the question of the waiver application that I believe is ready to go to the state board.
Yes, it is.
Excuse me. I'm looking through the recommendations. Did we actually make a motion or have an action on the return to the buildings by staff after the 26th or before
Not yet.
the 26th?
Mm-mm.
Done that yet?
We still need to do that one too.
Yeah.
The question of return is not part of the resolution. That's
Right.
something that will have to be taken up later. So Dr. Mills, if you'd like to proceed with an explanation of the waiver application.
All right, the waiver is just per statute 33-512. It explains that we had an emergency, which is one of the reasons for which you can apply for a waiver. We had a public health emergency. And then it also explains what we're trying to do to make up for lost learning, even though we won't make up the time, how we are working on getting our kids connected from a distance, including all kinds of ways of getting them connected to the internet so that they can participate in learning. And then it gives an accounting of the minutes that schools will be short. The largest one being at Wood River High School because they have those early releases on Wednesday all year, so they will be short, or excuse me, not minutes, they'll be short hours.
Before we ask for a motion, the questions from the trustees to Dr. Holmes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion then that we approve and instruct the superintendent to file the application.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. I believe then we are ready to move to the next item. Is that correct, Dr. Holmes? Is that everything you need under this title?
That's it, other than the staff return, but we'll bring that back next time around on trying to get the buildings cleaned out at the end of the year.
If you would, please. Thank you. All right, I believe the next item would be the English Language Arts adoption of materials.
Chairman Rourke, there's still an item called with the Cary Internet Services.
Yeah.
Is there?
Right.
Was that something we needed to vote on? I thought it was just a matter that needed to be explained.
I don't know if you need to vote on it as much as I need to hear your thoughts on it. Because right now we are connecting students in Cary either via Verizon hotspots or SafeLink. This would be another provider that would like to come in. It would be a tower, a signal from a tower, but it's supposed to be high-speed satellite signals. And they would need our assistance in getting it started by having a tower on our building and connecting to our Syringa feed until they get their own. There's no guarantee it will be done before school is out. However, it could provide better options in the future. So
It was my understanding last time we spoke that it was highly unlikely
Yep.
that it would be completed by the end of the school year.
Right. So it's just, do you want us to cooperate with them for future pandemics or need for internet or what?
And what would the cost to us be?
The cost to us would be allowing them to access the roof of Cary School, allowing them to hook to our Syringa line for the short term, and then the time that Mr. Royal and Ms. McGoffin have spent in trying to find land for them to put a tower on and making arrangements for this to happen. There's not a large financial cost to us.
Is there any out-of-pocket expense at all?
In staff time, Mr. Royal's time and Ms. McGoffin's time.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that their time isn't very valuable, but we are not going to have to write a check for anything.
No, that is correct.
Further questions from the board of Dr. Holmes?
I'd just like to say that I was looking into that a bit, trying to figure out how we could get Cary online and the Blue Mesh accessing the fiber that's already been trenched to the high school was the best option that I heard of. Teresa told me about that was something they had talked about before. There's a lot of different pieces to it because people are fairly spread out and there are lots of people up canyons and things like that, and this is unlikely to reach them.
Right.
When Teresa and I were talking, the hope was really to get as much of downtown Cary in that range as possible. I don't know if that's still what they're talking about with Blue Mesh or not. But right now, the only high-speed internet in Cary, to my knowledge, is the trench of fiber to Cary School. And so it seems like if we could facilitate that, it would be really worthwhile. And I don't know, Dr. Holmes, you said that they would hook up through our Syringa connection initially, which would mean it would go through our firewall and everything, which would kind of limit the access. But eventually, when they got in, it might be broader and open to anyone in the Cary area, it sounds like.
Per his email, he says once the equipment is running, we will place an order with Syringa Networks for their own feed and transfer away from the school. Yeah, it's not going to be anything that adults are going to be excited about right away because it's going to be limited to what we let kids get to.
Right. So it really will be initially, at least, focused on kids and teacher access to materials.
That's correct.
Which is also great.
Right. Right now, like I said, the only option we have are Verizon hotspots, if you can get a Verizon signal where you are, and SafeLink.
Well, with the possibility that this comes in waves and we end up doing more isolation orders going forward, it seems like it would be very prudent to pursue it.
Well, I was going to say, and I hate to bring this up because I'm pessimistic than I want to be, but certainly it's not out of the question that we're going to have another wave, that we may have to go back into a distance learning format. And one of the problems this year, obviously, has been the lack of connectivity in the Cary area. So certainly, if we're not going to have to come out of pocket and we can have that in place, I would be in favor of it.
Will this be any cost to the users?
Yes, he says in his email, which is there in the memo, that they are a for-profit company, and the estimate or the guesstimate right now is that it'd be about $100 hookup and $50 a month, which is very similar to the cost of SafeLink that we're putting out right now as we try to get kids onto SafeLink.
And it should be better bandwidth.
It should be better than SafeLink.
It's not satellite, it's fiber. Yeah.
Right. SafeLink is old equipment.
So essentially, we're just trying to provide more services for Carrie.
Right.
Not
Higher
anything.
speed internet, more bandwidth.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions of Dr. Holmes?
It's really trying to provide a utility to Carrie is essentially what we're trying to do, a service. Yeah.
Yes.
That's my.
I guess like
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess I don't want to say concern, but you know, we already have Frontier, we already have SafeLink, we already have the option of writing. So I don't know how this per se is providing something better, like, you know, if it's worth bringing it all on when we already have these other services to choose from.
So it should be a lot better than Frontier and SafeLink both, and cheaper. I mean, I don't know if it's cheaper than Frontier, but it should be cheaper than satellite, and it should have a lot more bandwidth, so it should be good for video, that, like what you're trying to do here, where you can't see our faces, but we can see yours. It should fix that problem.
Okay, great.
Any other questions, comments?
I just want to add, because I just keep saying this to everybody that will listen, is that I'm hoping one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that high-speed internet access becomes a utility that everybody should have, just like clean water, because right now it is a very much a divide between our have and have-nots.
Absolutely.
So the only thing we
And Laura,
go ahead, excuse me.
I was going to say, Laura, thank you so much for all your, and Dr. Holmes, all your time on that.
And Teresa in particular.
And Howie.
Yeah.
On this, but I suppose what we're going to do is just treat it as a motion to Dr. Holmes and Howie to go ahead and cooperate to try to get this established.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. So
Thank
you
you.
completed everything you wanted to take up on that item, Dr. Holmes.
No, I think we've done more than that, so thank you.
All right. Now I think we're ready for the English language arts adoption of materials. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you covering that, or do we have Angie online?
Angie is not online. Unless you had questions that didn't come up last time, it's just now taking action on it so we can get those orders in and have them in hand by start of school.
And this was on the information agenda at our regular March meeting, I believe, and it was explained at that time, correct?
That's correct.
Any further questions of Dr. Holmes on this item?
I just have some comments, but I can wait till we have a motion.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the purchase of these materials as presented by the ELA committee.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
So I would just like to say that I'm very impressed with how rigorous this process was to develop the proposal. I know they've been working on it for a really long time and have done an almost exhaustive effort to put it together. I was really pleased to hear that they made time for both a horizontal and vertical alignment in the district with the materials that they were choosing. And I did have a meeting with Angie and a couple other people just asking about paper books versus electronic books and what makes the most sense from a cost standpoint. And after about a half an hour of explaining how complicated it is and how many different ways there are to do online books, it was very clear that paper books still make more sense, which somehow just made me feel really good. I'd rather hold a book in the end anyway. But so I have nothing else to contribute to that, except that I think it makes a lot of sense.
Further discussion? I'll entertain a motion then that we approve the item.
We have a motion already.
And a second.
Excuse me, yes, any further discussion? And I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the materials as presented at our last meeting will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, chair votes with the ayes. We're moving then, and Vice Chair Green, I think this is an item that you have been shepherding along. Proposed ISBA resolution.
Yeah, so really no changes. I did reach out to Amy White to get a question for Trustee Stone, or an answer for Trustee Stone's question from our last board meeting, and I forwarded that to everyone. So really there's no changes from last month.
Any questions of Vice Chair Green about the nature and purpose of this resolution? And what you are asking here is that we approve this resolution for presentation to the ISBA, is that correct?
Yes, and if we also want to find other districts to support us in it, we can send it on to other school districts around our state to see if they also want to support and put their district name on it for ISBA.
Do you want to make the motion?
Sure. I move that we accept the proposed ISBA resolution allowing for decisions in student hearings in executive session.
I second.
Discussion? There being none, I'll call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. Next item is the permission to issue a request for qualifications for the Wood River Middle School boiler engineer. Is Howie with us tonight? Dr. Holmes?
He's not on the panelist, he's listening, but hopefully Mr. Fletcher can take care of those questions.
Oh, all right. Brian?
Certainly.
There comes Howie.
Hey, that's a nice effect. I like that.
Was that how?
You got an echo.
Is that better?
You have the sound on in two places,
Is your phone on?
your phone and on the computer screen?
There, how about that?
That's much better.
Better.
Yes, I had it open in two places, so thank you. I had to close that second one.
No worries.
The request on this is for a project that we'd like to undertake ultimately over at the Wood River Middle School. The boiler system over there is the original boiler system, hasn't been replaced. It's pushing, I want to say over 20 years. I'm not sure it's quite reached 25 yet. But ultimately, we're concerned about the system failing, and I'm sure it'll pick a January cold date in which it decides to fail. And we'd like to get in front of that event taking place. And the first step in that process is to hire an engineer to design the system that would go in and replace the existing system that is there. That's what Howie has drafted the memo associated with. One of the questions that probably then follows up on this is that how would we pay for that? And later on in my presentation, in the information section about the budget, I'll be discussing where we're at in terms of our plant facilities levy, what next year projects. And we will have the ability to section off a portion of the plant facilities funds that we have in reserve to pay for this project. This project it will be pricey. It could be in the range of $1 million. It's really very difficult at this point to pinpoint what that looks like, simply because the construction environment may change a bit when we go out to bid. It may be the same as it was pre-COVID, and so really hard to nail that down, but certainly a ballpark number of about $1 million is where we're hanging our hat right now. This initial amount, I believe Howie had listed right around 70,000 for soliciting the engineer to design the project. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions if you have any.
I have one. I know that we did some construction with the, I think you described it as shovel-ready funds that came out of the last economic crisis. Is that the kind of thing that you look into to see if there are possibilities for funding things like that based on what's going on in Washington?
Yeah, we're keeping an eye on that. We had a conference call today in which we didn't talk about the details, but we're going to get some of those details from the one of the individuals on that call. At present, we're not familiar with any shovel-ready job project funding for public entities, but the CARES Act is they're talking about a second, a third, possibly a fourth, who knows how long, and how many different versions of this stimulus/bailout program that they might offer in the future. So we're hoping that there would be some opportunity to leverage federal stimulus dollars. If they present themselves, we will pursue them.
And getting shovel-ready probably would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Brian, I'm not trying to telegraph anything here, but if we decide not to go forward this year with the plant facilities levy, do we have funds elsewhere that could be utilized for the project?
We have two other additional sources of funding. One would be the land lottery. We call it the land acquisition, but those folks who have been watching budget conversations over the last several years, it was previously known as the land lottery account. We have about a little over $1 million in that account. That was originally established to use money that was flowed to the district via the lottery to purchase property for the district for its future building needs. The whole lottery funding mechanism has changed, and so those are dollars that are sitting in an account that are available to use at the discretion of the board as they would like. The second is that if we tapped into the financial emergency fund, there's some parameters that the previous board has wrapped around that, but with the loss of the supplemental levy for next year, we certainly would meet the criteria that was originally established on when those funds would be available. And that's over $3.5 million. So we do have some alternate backup options in the event that the board chooses not to use plant facility dollars.
I would just like to note how much I appreciate that we have backup funds in some places right now, and well done job to Brian and Dr. Holmes and to the board, the previous board, for making that happen. Thank you. Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Does someone want to make a motion that we approve this? This is a request only for hiring an engineer or an engineering firm. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes, that is correct. We're just limiting the scope to that singular aspect at this point.
And that does not at this point commit us to going forward with the project itself.
It does not. We would come back with a request to go out for the entire project at a later date.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion then for approval of this request.
I move we proceed with a request for qualification from an engineering firm for a Wood River Middle School HVAC retrofit upgrade.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of authorizing this request will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Chair votes with the ayes. That request is approved.
Thank you.
Now, I believe, Trustee Stone, that this next item is yours. That is the 2020-21 and 2021-22 school calendar, correct?
Yes, that's something that Amber and I both worked on. And after talking about it in our last board meeting, we had a meeting with the calendar committee. We put together a proposal to the calendar committee with 3 different items on it. The first one was to address the winter break, which was starting on the 24th of December next year and the 23rd the year after. And the second proposal was there were 3 teacher work days that were scheduled at the end of the school year. And there had been some discussion that that was too much at the end of the school year. Teachers are pretty tired at that point. And it would be much more useful to have that in the middle of the semester. And then the last question was addressing the schools, the date that the schools start, which is something that comes up frequently in our community with concerns about starting so far in the middle of August, so far before Labor Day. So the committee, we spoke with them for about an hour and a half. They, at the end of the discussion, they voted unanimously to recommend that the Board of Trustees make the following changes to the 2020-21 and 2021-22 calendars. And I'm just going to summarize it because it's laid out in the document. But basically, that winter break would start after the Friday, December 18th. So there would be no school on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. That the teachers return to school on Monday, January 24th. That Monday, January 4th and 5th, that those become teacher work days. And that students return to school on Wednesday, January 6th, and that's when the second semester starts. That would require rescheduling or possibly canceling the professional development with Dr. Luis Cruz, which is unfortunate because I think there's a lot of support for the work that he does. And then they also the committee also recommended that the final day for teachers become Tuesday, May 25th. Oh, that doesn't look right. Wednesday, May 25th. So taking one day and moving it up into April, a teacher collaboration day into April. That was the recommendation of the board. The committee, they did not recommend changing the start date of the calendar. And I would like to go through the reasons for that. I don't know if we want to vote on the recommendation first, or if it makes sense for me to lay out kind of what the reasons were for having the start date when it is.
Why don't you summarize the reasons?
Okay, so I think a really important aspect of this is the last calendar committee spent over a year and a half considering all aspects of the calendar. And I know I spent about 40 hours over the last month trying to learn everything that I could about it and try and come up with a solution, some way to start it later or somehow address it. I had great confidence I would be able to do that, and I did not. I was unable to. They had done an excellent job, no surprise. And these are the things that I learned about why the calendar starts when it does. The calendar primarily revolves around secondary school schedules because while elementary schools are pretty independent and flexible, the middle and high school programs are tightly integrated with the world outside of our district, and those calendars are out of our control. Colleges and universities finish their first semester finals before winter break. Those trimesters, those that are on trimesters usually start in September, and they have 1 trimester before winter break and 2 after.
Lost Laura.
Well,
Texas.
When the calendar committee met, we had an earthquake, so it's very dangerous topic.
Yes, we did.
Oh, looks like she's coming back.
Well, this is a little awkward.
Definite pause.
Do you want to take a short recess?
Well,
No.
do you want me to try to fill in? Because, and Brian, you were on that committee, and Amber, maybe we can fill in some of the thinking of trying to get the first semester done before winter break.
Yeah.
Part of that is also besides being aligned with colleges and universities, it does give students a winter break where they're not cramming for finals for their return. And there's a lot of research going on right now about the mental health benefits that provides to students in having a break during that time. What were some of the other issues? That's one that sticks in my mind right now.
They're actually summarized, I believe, in the memo.
It's all there.
Yeah.
You know,
Reasons for and reasons against.
so I have Laura on my phone. Hi, Laura. I have
I
her
don't know
on.
what happened, but I can't seem to get on.
Okay, so we're gonna let her finish. So can everybody hear her okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Laura, go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm not sure where I lost you.
It was in regards to the colleges, I believe, and then we were kind of
Okay.
moving through the semesters versus trimesters.
Okay, so colleges and universities they always try and finish their first semester before winter break. Those that are on trimesters start in September. They have one trimester before winter break and two after. Anybody that's on the semester system has to start in mid-August in order to complete their semester before Christmas. And we used to be on trimesters, but we've been on semesters now for quite a while because they work better for students for multiple reasons. So that's one thing that I think is confusing for people when they think about why can't we just start later? Our school used to start later, but I think there's a real difference if you're trying to on a semester system versus a trimester system.
And Laura, just to add on to that, Carrie is on trimester.
Carrie is on
yes,
trimesters.
we
That's
are,
right.
yeah.
Carrie's
So
on
just throwing that.
trimesters.
Okay.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that reminder.
Yeah.
So, here's the other thing. Over 55% of our high school students take advanced placement or dual credit classes. And the University of Idaho, CSI, and CWI, which they do these programs as a dual credit through, they are all on semester schedules. In addition, the AP tests that students take are in early May. And so every week that our high schools start later gives our students a week less time to study than other students who are taking these classes around the state and even around the world. So students who are, and it's important because students who are successful in AP classes and dual credit classes can earn college credit. There are some students graduating from our high school that have a year and a half of college paid for because of the classes that they've taken. So there's a huge potentially monetary value to them taking these classes. In addition, many colleges require students to have taken a significant number of AP classes or even a sample number of AP classes in order to be considered for admission. And all of those schedules are out of the control of our district. And every week we start later limits our students' ability to be as successful as possible in those classes. Last couple points, the mental health of our high school students is a really important issue, and providing students with an actual and extended break between semesters an opportunity to step away from the stress. Returning from the holidays to finals in January does not work the same way, not as much of a stress relief. When they surveyed the students after finishing the semester in December this year, 542 students responded at Wood River Middle School and Silver Creek. And I thought the numbers were very striking. Only 4% of the 542 students said that change was not helpful. 56% of them found early very helpful, and 26% found it to be somewhat helpful. So it was overwhelmingly considered helpful by students. And then the final thing, which I think is not as important as the academics, but this number really surprised me, is 30% of Wood River High School students participate in fall sports. 30% of them. And the other schools in our district, and that was just at Wood River High School, and there's a bunch at Cary too. And all those, our students are participating in sport in our district. The other schools in our district all start earlier. So and even across the state. So it's the same thing. Sports are important for motivating kids at school, and I think students who sometimes would lose interest in school, sports keep them on track. And so having it work well with sports, I think, is important, if not quite as important as the other stuff. And unfortunately, elementary schools have a lot more flexibility, and so it's a little harder to understand, but I think all of our kids end up benefiting once they're in the middle school and high school by having this earlier schedule. That's all.
Any questions of Laura or Amber? So what we're doing here technically, Trustee Stone, is amending the established calendar for those 2 academic years.
That's right. And I want to say one more thing. The other thing that the committee recommended, they voted 10-2 to recommend that the board convene a new calendar committee this fall to look more closely at the following year calendar after being given clear priorities by the board. So they still recommended, not unanimously, but very strongly, we do have somebody look at the following year calendar and see if there are other adjustments that can be made that could make it better.
All right.
What following year are you talking about? 22, 23?
No, they recommended having somebody this fall look at the 2021-22 calendar, the third calendar in this 3-year cycle.
I'm still not clear, because in this action, whatever, it's 2021 and 21-22. So the next one, 22 is 21. 2021, you got 21-22. So we're talking 22-23 is the one they want to convene this fall to discuss. Correct?
Incorrect. Oh no. Wait.
That's right.
You got 2 calendars on the table, and they end in 22. So the next calendar following these 2 calendars would be 22-23.
Right.
Okay. And so you want to put a committee together to calculate 22-23. That's what was recommended?
No. The recommendation was this fall that they look at the following year.
So we approve like the 2021, and then they recommend that we look at still the 21-22, even though we looked at it, but with the new committee's eyes looking at.
Well, let's not complicate things.
We need to have this clear.
What we have in front of us right now is a proposal to amend the 2021 and 21-22 academic calendars. Anything else that the committee wants to do isn't part of this particular matter in front of the board. Yes.
But we also have a additional commentary towards that, because we're talking about 2021, 21-22, but we're looking at redoing 21-22. So my question here is, why don't we just discuss 2021, convene this group together and do 21-22, rather than change 21-22 and then change it again when we get a recommendation from that committee? That's my point.
So I get your point, but my understanding, and I'll let Laura and Amber address it, my understanding was this will be in place in case, for whatever reason, they can't reach an agreement on further revisions, or there's something that prevents further consideration. So these would be the changes for the next 2 academic years, but that the committee would continue to study what to do in the future.
And just, Chairman Rick, adding on to that, a lot of them recommended a new committee. So it would not be the committee currently, but they recommended that we that we form a new committee.
All right.
And the idea was that planning 3 calendars was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're very complicated. And they felt good about the calendar they did the first year, which was this year's calendar, but they did not have the time to really look at the next 2 calendars. We also right now don't have a lot of time to look at the next year's calendar. And so, but we know, and everyone seems very clear that fixing Christmas break is important and that they don't need the 3 days at the end of the year, and they're pretty easy to fix. And so at a minimum, because you never know when maybe like a pandemic will show up and ruin your plans, I think we fix what we know is problematic by fixing the Christmas break and that 3 days at the end of the year for both years. And then our plan in the fall to discuss, and I think that's when we decide. But in the fall, we discuss, do we want to look at the next year? Do we want to come up with guidelines for what we want on a calendar? And then maybe at that point have to look out. But I think today, let's fix what we know is problematic in both of those calendars. And that was what the recommendation was.
Well, I think Trustee Clayton is asking, why do you have to fix 2 years if this fall you are going to take up the topic again?
It's exactly what I said.
What if it doesn't happen? What if we're in the middle of, I don't, when we know that it needs to be fixed, what if we don't get around to it? What if we don't get a committee convened?
We might have to.
Chairman, I have some comments that may kind of lead us to maybe help us with a decision. As I was going through the proposal based on the 2 recommendations, for the 2021, we have 171 total student days and 184 total staff days. The following year, 21-22, we have a total of 170 student days and 183 staff days. Based on the master agreement, teachers are contracted to work 185 days. So we are actually short on our contracted certified staff based on the master agreement. So even then, we're still going to have to make adjustments because we have not fulfilled the contract.
I'm not sure that cleared anything up, Kelly.
I know, and I'm sorry to throw another wrench in the gears. However, I had a conversation earlier today with Irene Healy, who was a member of the calendar committee, and she made a suggestion, and I don't know how this would work, but we can use that day as a negotiation between teachers to find out where they want that additional teacher workday, because you have to either add it to the beginning of the year, end of the year, or replace a day that they aren't normally working. So that was just something that I, going through this proposal, noticed that we have not fulfilled the contracted teacher workdays.
Trustee Stone, you want to address that? Apparently not.
Well, she's on the phone with Amber, and Amber's out too.
Oh no.
Can't hear ya.
I got Laura here. Hey, Laura.
Look, Laura?
I got Laura. You want to repeat that? I got Laura. Laura.
Thank you. Hi. So Amber was having trouble hearing what Kelly was saying, and so I could either. I'm trying to join the event again, so I'm hoping that I'll be in here in just a moment. See, looks like I'm up.
Frankly, I didn't hear any of that.
I think I lost her.
Talking with Laura?
Yes.
Was. I got to call her back.
Good.
Hang on one sec.
Yeah.
Here you go, Laura. I lost you. I don't know how I lost you. Okay, she's back.
I'm on the screen. You're not seeing.
Oh, you good? No. I don't see you. Hey, Ben, can you promote her? She has to be promoted.
All right. You
There
guys.
you are. Yay.
I'm hanging up.
Okay. So Kelly, you were making that point that I would love to hear. I'm sorry I missed it.
So based on the master agreement, teachers are contracted to work 185 days. In the first calendar for 2021, there's only 184 total staff days, and the next year for 21-22, there are only 183. So we are not fulfilling the master agreement contract for teacher workdays. There are, some options that can be taken on. I mean, you can look at replacing one of the holidays with a teacher workday. You could look at replacing President's Day as a teacher workday, or adding a day on the end of the year. But like you've said before, that 3 days is a long time for teacher workdays. It's a lot of time, and they don't necessarily need all of that. The only thing that I could think would replace that or fix that is if we were able to reschedule Luis Cruz for the end of the year, if that's a possibility. And I see GC shaking her head, so I'm guessing that's a no.
All right, we have attempted to reschedule Luis Cruz for January 4th and 5th before the students return. That is not an option. He is not available in the summer. We do have him tentatively booked for one day of April 16th. And we've contracted with him for 2, but we might have to forfeit the second day.
Look, I think what's happened here is that we have entered the swamp of the school calendar. And if we're not careful, we're not going to get out of that swamp tonight. Well, why can't we just vote on the proposal to change the calendar and then take up in negotiations where we're going to fill out the 185 days?
And that was a suggestion by Irene Healy in my conversation earlier with her today, is that one day could be negotiated, and teachers we can work with them and put it in a place where it works best for them.
All right, is there any further discussion on the amendments to the 2020, 2021, and 2021, 2022 academic calendars?
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Hey, Clayton.
having been through the calendar thing several times in my tenure, the first thing I want to say is that I think that I'm okay with, given the current status of affairs, we're sure next year the proposal here works for me fine, right? Taking it out 2 years, I think that we're pushing it a little too far in my opinion. I don't know how other people think, but in light of what we received as feedback in our survey, in light of what I've received from pretty broad community input, at least from the trades and the businesses, the start date of being too early in the summer is problematic for a lot of people. And I think just pushing it out and voting this in for the next 2 years, even with the consideration in the fall of putting a committee together, is going to be viewed as another situation of where we told them, but they don't listen. And I really think we should probably give it some more thought. I appreciate very much all of Trustee Stone's work regarding the formulation of the reasons why this works from an educational perspective. But what comes across in all of that is this committee should probably be just made of high school people, because this is really being driven by high school. Nowhere in the commentary is there any elementary input or middle school input to speak of. It's driven really by tests, standardized testing, AP exams, And when you do the arithmetic on the composition of the high school students who actually engaged in it, when you calculate the 52% and the 26% of the 542 respondents, you get 440 students who were in favor of it. That's less than half the population of the high school in favor of that. There's 500 kids we haven't heard from and may have an opinion or not. I don't know. They weren't willing to take it on. Chances are the ones that did take it on are the ones who are advanced and understand that those things are good. But there are other students and families to take into consideration. I'm just throwing it out there because it's a big decision. And I know you mentioned this is getting a little mired or falling into quicksand, but this is always what happens with calendar. And everything has to be considered. And like I said, I'm in favor of doing this next year, but I really would like and encourage us to take a hard look at it for the subsequent year, rather than just go for 2021, 21, 22. That's how I feel.
Any further discussion?
In looking at in hearing all your comments and looking at the proposal in total, I am not opposed to just approving 1 year of the calendar and looking at the following year with a committee. It's not something I'm opposed to doing, especially with the missing teacher workdays. It's easier to fix that teacher workday the first year, but the second year with 2 missing days, that's a little bit more convoluted and difficult to work with, I think. So in my opinion, I would rather approve just 1 calendar year and then maybe follow up in another year with the committee and have them work on it.
I'd just like to make a note. I agree with the problem with losing 2 workdays the second year is an issue. I do want to just point out that the advantages of starting later that people have talked to me include that the weather's usually nicer here in August than in May, which makes for good family and vacation time. August is a busy time with a lot of local work opportunities. High school students and teachers are an important resource for local businesses. When they need to get back to school early, it makes less sense to hire them for day jobs. They lose opportunities to earn money. There's also a problem right now with the calendar the way it is, that high school instruction has lost some time in May that they've been using very productively. But when I just want to be clear, even if we're going to reconsider the whole calendar in the fall for the following year, I want to be really clear that the reason it's spaced like this is because it really makes a significant difference for our high school and middle school, because their calendar is tied with the outside world. And the elementary school calendar is not, and they have the flexibility. They could do it at all different times and it wouldn't matter because their programs are not tied to calendars outside of ours. But even if we go and revisit this next fall, that is not going to change the underlying fundamental principles that the world is different now than when we went to school, and there are a lot of standardized tests that are taken at fixed times. That is not going to change. And so we can reopen the whole thing and we can explain it to everybody again, but those things are fixed. And I think it's important and incumbent on us to explain to our community that the reason we do this is because of all these things that they're not aware of. These are the reasons why we have the calendar start early, because it's best for our students. It provides the most opportunities for them, most opportunities to get into colleges, the most opportunities to earn college credit while they're here. And the arguments just don't weigh as heavily for starting later.
Well, I don't hear anybody arguing with the proposition that there are change factors or that we ought to make these changes for the next academic year. What I do hear is some reticence to do it for 2 years, particularly if we're going to kick this back to a new committee next fall. So could we just take up the next academic year, vote on that, and see what goes from there?
That sounds great. Yep.
I do have one question.
That'd be great.
So
Yeah,
we are still missing 1 day for this coming current year. Is that correct?
Let me get back to the memo.
Or it would be 2021.
For 2021, there is a teacher workday missing. If,
Okay, so still one. So
and that's just, yeah. Total staff days is 184 for the 2021 year.
And if I just could add on, I suspect because we took the 16th as a teacher work day instead of an instructional day, that we are going to be at the wire on student instruction time. So
We have only one extra day for student instruction instead of 2 like we have before.
And so Wood River High School is going to have to be very cognizant of that. If we have any snow days, they'll have to give up their Wednesday early releases.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
All right, if you have no objection, Trustee Stone, would you make a motion that we adopt the change or the amendment in the academic calendar for academic year 2020, 2021? And then, without making it part of the motion, we can just agree that it will be reconsidered and perhaps with a new committee sometime next fall.
Yes, I move that we accept the calendar committee's recommendations for the upcoming year, 2021 only.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Can we just, do we need to add anything about the understanding that that teacher workday will be negotiated?
No.
Okay.
I think that's a matter for negotiation and for the administration. I don't feel comfortable in trying to dictate that outside of the context of negotiations with the master agreement.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Chair votes with the ayes. All right, let's move on. This is, the next one is a consideration of a planned facilities levy. We had, as the board knows, prior to the pandemic, we had scheduled a public hearing on the proposed planned facilities levy. We vacated that because of our concern with being prepared for the pandemic adjustments. Now there's some question about whether we really ought to go forward at all this year, waiting to see what the economic impact is going to be to this valley, to this school district, which I don't think any of us believes is going to be minor. My thought was it would be in the best interest of the district and everyone else if we simply took that matter off of our radar until at least next year, next May.
And possibly March, right?
Pardon me? We can,
March.
well, assuming that the legislature doesn't take another shot at taking days away,
Right.
that would be the earliest that we could do it if we skip August and we skip November. It just seems to me we don't have a realistic possibility of doing that. So the earliest we could do it would be March. Before I call for a motion, let anyone have any comments about that? Go ahead, Vice Chairman Gray.
I just wanted to, I guess, Brian Fletcher can answer this question, but where do we stand with our plant facilities levy now, and how far out can we stretch it if we can? But I think that can go along with the discussion after the motion. That's fine.
Anybody have any comment ahead of the motion? All right, I'll entertain a motion that we not take up the plant, not put it before the voters until at least March of 2021. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
So I guess for me, it was if we don't run the levy in February or in August, what will that put us in, or where will we be come next year, finance-wise?
Brian, you want to take that up?
Certainly. I'll have some more information in regards to our budget conversation. That's in the information section, which there's a spreadsheet material that I think will probably do a better job of illustrating it than talking about it. But next year, we will have sufficient funds at the end of this year to carry us through full funding of next year, including paying the bond, our last bond payment, funding the technology and the maintenance budgets at their traditional amounts of $1 million and $1.3 million respectively. And then we should have enough to carry us into the following year, depending on what we spend next year or how that trend looks like, will certainly have an impact on what we'll have available. But certainly no problems in regards to next year covering and spending under the typical budgetary guidelines that we've used in the past.
And that's because we would be spending down savings?
That's correct.
So that would leave us in less of a position, in a worse position going forward for emergencies like this.
Correct, yes. For at least as having our money available for, let's just say a boiler were to break down. So certainly the more that we spend, the less we have available for issues in the future if we postpone the levy again or if the levy does not pass.
Right. And do we have an expectation at all about what will happen with state revenues? I keep thinking that we're funded by sales taxes right now and everything's closed.
Yeah, we don't have any direct guidance other than the 1% holdback for this particular year. So this year we know we'll have a 1% holdback, which is going to be about $200,000 for our district. And then next year the governor has only offered the condolences of they're taking it under consideration about what that might, if there'll be a budget holdback and what it might look like. They haven't offered any statements or guidance in regards to that topic. Although the State Department of Education Finance Director had mentioned that it's pretty highly likely, given the parameters that you just described in regards to sales tax and the loss of sales tax for big ticket items, that it's highly likely that there will be some form of a holdback. How much that is in terms of percent and dollars, and in what form that takes in regards to how it impacts the funding formula still remains to be defined.
And do we have any kind of idea when they'll get back to us on that? Because we're trying to set our own budget and that's going to be a significant part of it.
Yeah, they had originally said that they thought they would be back to us by the end of this week. So we're hopeful that we'll have some actionable intelligence and guidance that we can move forward and plan on.
And what about property taxes? Can you explain a little bit again about what can happen in an economic crisis with our revenue that we get from property taxes?
Certainly. Yeah, with property taxes, we receive what taxpayers pay. So the county is under no obligation to make any of the municipalities or levying entities whole in regards to what is levied versus what they receive from the property taxpayers. So the longer this goes on, the more challenging it will certainly be on people making their mortgages and as a part of their mortgage, their property taxes. So we can levy $30 million in local property taxes next year, but if we only receive $26 million or whatever that number might be, we can only spend the cash that they receive. So that is something that will certainly be on our minds come our July payment, but I think it's probably next year's December and the following July that could be more greatly impacted as this thing unfolds.
So we're looking at basically a triple hit here from the levy that we've had, that the plant facility levy is running out and not starting again. We really needed to do a supplemental levy, but we didn't. We put that off. State revenues from sales tax are down, and property taxes potentially could be lower.
That's correct. Yeah, it all kind of arrives in 1 year. The issue about property taxes is generally sooner or later you get them. That doesn't help you at the time when you need the money to support the educational efforts that we have budgeted for that particular year. So It doesn't help us that we might get these funds in 22, 23, when we're, levying and need them in 21.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions of Brian? All right, I'll entertain discussion. Vice Chair Green, go ahead.
Sorry, you cut out. I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm entertaining discussion on the motion at this point.
No, I think I'm good. I don't need any more questions answered, so.
Trustee Clayton?
I think your mic's off.
Yeah.
I don't have anything at this time.
All right, Trustee Larned?
I don't have anything. Ryan answered my questions. Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, there are two things here. One, I think it would be an exceeding bad faith, given what the economic consequences are going to be to this school district, for us to be asking for more money in August or November of this year. Secondly, even if we wanted to do that, I have severe doubts about whether we would be able to get it improved or approved anyway. So for my part, at least, I think we would be well served to simply take it off the agenda at this point and reconsider after the first of next year, when we have some idea of what the real economic impact is going to be to everyone. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those.
I'd just like to say I completely agree with you, Chairman.
Thank you. All those in favor of vacating any plans for the plant facilities levy this year, signify by saying aye.
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 Did I hear a vote from Trustee Stone
Aye.
and Trustee Larna?
Aye.
Chair votes with the ayes. That motion passes. All right, and I think this is the time when we turn to you. Let's see, no, first we have to have the board chair report. You just had it, so let's move on to the student liaison report.
I see Beatrice is on. Beatrice, can you, there we go.
There you go. Yeah, I'm unmuted.
All right, we can hear you, Beatrice. Go ahead.
So what I'm understanding, do you guys want me to just say how it is doing online classes and just being out of school?
That would be very helpful.
What was that?
That would be very helpful. Go ahead, Beatrice.
Okay, so my experience is I don't really have motivation to do schoolwork online as I did in like school, but I'm working everything out. The school has done a good job on making us understand what we have to do, so that's very helpful. We're doing some Google Hangouts with our advisors, teachers, so that really helps with motivation sometimes. But other than that, it's kind of difficult to know what you're doing.
So you would rather be in class, but you are getting by as best as possible. Is that correct, Beatrice?
Yeah.
And you're not really supposed to be spending a lot of time with your fellow students, but do you have any sense of how your peers are feeling right now?
Well, I do FaceTime some of them, of my friends, or text them, and they're telling me they're feeling the same way, like they'd rather be at school right now and just getting to talk to each other and bond with each other and not do big chats with teachers and all that. Like they just miss bonding with each other and being able to ask questions with the teachers right away and getting them answered instead of having to email, text, and do all those things.
But do they understand why we've had to do this?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. Any of the trustees have questions for Beatrice?
Well, thank you for talking with us, Beatrice. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do. All right. Dr. Holmes, the superintendent's report, please.
Okay, I've got two things tonight. First of all, you had asked for what has been the impact of COVID-19 on our staff.
Yes.
And of course, if staff have not self-disclosed, we don't know. But we know that there were 14 staff members who were diagnosed with COVID-19 through their own self-disclosure, and 6 staff members had family members, so that also put staff into quarantine. And we know there are 3 currently awaiting results. I suspect there are more that haven't self-disclosed, but considering we have 516 staff members, that's a pretty small number. So I assume it's a little larger, and I assume by immediately closing schools, we helped stop that spread. The second thing is just how proud I am of BCSD in the work that we have been doing since we closed. We have provided 6 weeks of food to students despite being closed, with some incredible work on the part of staff and volunteers. And we've got a ways to go. So if any of the trustees want to volunteer to help, we're looking for more helpers as we go forward on getting that food to grab and go, books have been distributed with the exception of Alturas has their last day tomorrow for distribution, and I believe Kindergarten at Cary does not have them yet, but otherwise they have been distributed. We had 153 families that needed to be connected to the internet in order for those 287 students in those families to fully participate. We still have 47 students that we have not been able to reach via phone or anything, so we're still looking for them, but that's considerably down from where we were last Friday. We have 35 of those families we have referred to Cox, and Cox got 10 of them on today. Cox has been a terrific partner. They are giving the family 60 days free, and then it's $9.95 a month going forward. And they have a decent supply on hand to get families connected. They are going to run out of the devices they need to connect families, and hopefully it won't be back ordered too long. We have 12 families that we have referred to SafeLink, which represents 23 kids, because SafeLink is the only option where those families live. Hopefully SafeLink will also be very proactive in getting them connected. The families will be connected and we will be billed. Ms. McGoffin distributed 7 hotspots today that put another 18 students on. These were primarily in the Cary area. And we have another 10 hotspots coming later this week, thanks to Trustee Stone browsing the internet. We have 66 families that we helped get better connections and better rates so that they could actually do school, kind of like Trustee Larna was talking about earlier. Some of the connections are not adequate for doing school if it's an old copper line. And then we have 23 families we're still looking for solutions on. And then, as I said, 47 students that we're trying to still get connected with so that we can figure out what they need. I also want to share that as teachers were calling students and reconnecting with them and finding out what their needs were, a lot of our high school students were giving us information such as they were working at one of the local grocery stores a couple days a week now because their parents had lost their job, and so they would not be available for participating at certain times. They were very willing to do their work, but they had to work around the fact that they are now working and trying to help their family stay afloat. So the sad piece of where we are right now, but I think that the fact that in 12 days or less, we've got Chromebooks out and all those families either connected or on the way to being connected is incredible work of the BCSD team.
All right. Any questions to Dr. Holmes? All right.
I just do about Altura.
Go ahead.
Rebate disseminating, like, do you plan on having them finish tomorrow, or what was, I guess, did you guys do each school individually, or how did that work with the Chromebooks?
Ms. McGoffin had a team who went in and cleaned Chromebooks, and that was done about a week ago. Then each school figured out how they wanted to distribute what days, how they wanted to stagger time, and Altura selected Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. They had, of course, everybody connected with their kids on April 6th and 7th as instructed for all of them that we could. Like I said, we're still looking for 47 of them, and provided them with learning activities via the phone. But each school got to pick their own time to do it, just like each school picks their own time to do back to school night and those kinds of things. So that was Altura's choice to do it today and tomorrow.
Any other questions, Dr. Holmes? Thank you, Dr. Holmes. And now, Brian, it's time for the budget overview.
Thank you, Chairman. What I'll do is I'll just work through the attachment that was provided online. And we'll start by going back and just revisiting the cheat material that we looked at last month, actually. Felt like last week, but last month. And that was our enrollment numbers. And we talked about we're going to drop about 51 students from this year being the in-house February count that we conducted. So during the first week of February, we took enrollment and attendance so that we had the most up-to-date numbers when we started this process. So from that count down, it's about a 50-student drop. If we look at the count from our last year's budgeted enrollment to next year's budgeted enrollment, it's about an 80-student drop. So we're looking at fewer students, which means fewer dollars. The second page of that spreadsheet or attachment, which originally was a spreadsheet, just takes a look. Again, we looked at this material in last month, so I'm just going to quickly go over it. But essentially, it breaks down the enrollment data on that first tab, which was by grade level, and looks at it on a school level. So you can see where the reductions are actually taking place. The biggest hits are taking place at Haley and Wood River Middle School. So then I'll move to the next page down, which is a flow chart. And it's the primary reason of looking at this is it is supposed to illustrate, the state really talks about funding in terms of support units, which is a sort of a code word for attendance. And so if you think of about 20 students attendance, which is what makes up or derives a support unit, you can see that enrollment is the number of students that we anticipate next year, but really attendance is a derivative of that enrollment, and then the support unit, which is a calculation, is derived from the average daily attendance of that enrollment. And from there, it's the support units that really drive a number of the big pieces that we use for our, or the state uses for determining funding, which is why we spend so much time looking at enrollment and so much time looking at average daily attendance, which I may reference as ADA from time to time. I try to stay away from support units because it's really, folks don't generally understand what that is, and it's public education, at least Idaho public education financing lingo, and so I'm trying to stay away from that. But the funding mechanisms that come through, it's a fairly long, complicated funding formula, for lack of a better term. And so what we'll talk about when we get to the legislation pieces are some of the pieces that are in this formula were modified to provide additional revenue next year. But you can see the revenue does arrive to us in four primary methodologies or defined buckets, if you will. One being discretionary, one being for administration, one being for classified, and one being for certified. And then there's a benefit piece that's derived from there. And what's important to note is this is a funding mechanism, and frequently people associate the funding mechanism for certified. So money that comes for the certified staff, well, that should be used for certified staff. And in some districts, that's the manner in which they use to determine how much they're going to compensate teachers in any given year, predicated upon the money they receive from the state of Idaho through its funding formula. Many other districts do not do that. And this is really just a funding mechanism. It gets a little bit complicated, and some of the language that's used makes it suggest that the money that comes through is supposed to be used for these specific purposes, but it's just, that's actually not the case. So I'll take a moment just because I can't see everybody, but are there any questions I can answer at this point? If not, I'll go ahead and continue. So the next page down is our support units. And I just mentioned that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But just to give you an idea of how our support units have been in decline, in 18-19 year, we had 165.3 support units. In our current year, in our first reporting period, we had 160.88. So we had a precipitous drop from last year to this year. And next year, we're forecasting dropping to about 158 support units. So again, fewer students means fewer support units, means less dollars that the state sends us. And we're looking for the state to increase the funding on a per student level so that we will sort of mitigate some of the loss associated with fewer students. The next page down is just the general fund revenues. And this is just a overview in regards to how the dollars are broken up. And it's about a 34% local property tax and 60% property, 60% is our local property tax. That's that blue area on the pie graph, and then 34 being the gray area is what comes from the state. Each year we roll 5% of our budgeted funds that have been saved from previous years into the next year's funding. And then there's 1% that really is just miscellaneous types of items. That's not terribly consequential. It's actually just a little less than that. So we're anticipating next year, the numbers didn't quite turn out right. We're anticipating more of a shift with the loss of the supplemental levy. So that 60% will go down and that 34% will go up. So I'll have more updated graphs for you when we return in our May budget, our May meeting. When I talk about the budget, I'll have more details for you. And then just looking at the general fund expense page, again, this is just a breakout that is typical where 82% of our general fund funds are spent on salaries and benefits. This is a business that is really oriented around people. We spend dollars from plant facilities and bond dollars on facilities. So that really frees up the ability for the general fund to be used to spend on staffing, paying utilities, cleaning buildings and things of that, maintaining and smaller, what I'll call smaller equipment related items. We move the larger equipment pieces into the plant facilities levy. So kind of gives you an indication. We talked about earlier how important the plant facilities is in freeing up dollars that would otherwise be needed for those purposes in the general fund to keep our educational content whole. The other big piece that's in our expense budget for the general fund is 8% is insurance, transfers, and contingency. 5% of that is our contingency. We hope to not ever chew into that, but it's the board provides that from the perspective that if we have over expenditures in other areas, that's our bumper to not go over spending for the entire budget. Purchase services about 6% and supplies and material is about 4%. And as mentioned earlier, equipment is really just nominal. It's almost negligible. So again, I'll just pause. If there's any questions, I'll answer those. If not, I'll move on to the legislation piece.
Brian, if you're able to, the decline, the loss in enrollment anticipated for next year, and I know we don't have all of the calculations in from state support, but what does that mean? If we lose 51 students, what's the impact? How many dollars are we talking about?
Yeah, losing those students could reduce us somewhere around $300,000 to $500,000. It all depends on the adjustments that are being made with the funding formula. So when those pieces come through and they're supposed to, usually they have the tools out that we use to break down and more accurately evaluate and forecast what next year is going to look like. The State Department has not provided that. I'm not being critical because they're grappling with these times just like everybody else is. But they typically have those tools out in early April, and then they have what they call the Legislative Roadshow, where they come out and they share with school districts across the state they take the legislative language and then they format that into intent language. So it's hard for me to give you a definitive or specific number because we really need to see how the funding formula was absolutely modified to then plug our numbers in and see how that rings out, if you will. But right now I'm anticipating somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 loss, and that primarily driven by the loss of this number of students.
Thank you.
Certainly. So just a few highlights on the 2021 budget outcomes from the legislature and the governor. The net increase in statewide educational funding, and I probably should have a little asterisk here that says this is prior to any holdback for the 2021 school year. So any holdback will certainly have an impact on A, the funding formula that we just talked about, and B, how that impacts the district in regards to what its funding will look like next year. So the state, at least prior to this COVID-19 breakout, had increased funding overall for the entire educational effort across the state for all districts by roughly 4%. And how they do that is they modify or tweak the funding formula. So sometimes that means that you'll have a district that might actually see 6 or 7 or 8% increase, and then you'll have others that might have 1% or 0 or might even go backwards. And again, that's an outcome of how the funding formula is modified, and then how the characteristics of your district in terms of the number of students, the teachers that you have on staff in regards to their years of service, and then their educational level. All those things really impact this funding formula in various ways that doesn't necessarily mean that a district will participate at a 4% level. And so since we know that we have fewer students next year, and students being the chief driver in regards to participating in that funding formula, we very much anticipate that we will not see a 4% increase. That, in fact, we may very well be level at best and likely might see a bit of a decrease. But changes to the funding formula, they did increase what they call the factor for administrative and classified staff by 2%. They increased the 1.7 in the discretionary line item. And the discretionary, really, if you think about it, the idea behind that is it pays for everything that's non-staff oriented. And the purpose of that increase was to help offset health insurance increases to districts, which would probably love to have a 1.7% increase in their health insurance in costs next year. Maybe there's some districts out there that are able to get away with that, but that's probably going to be a little anemic for covering the health insurance cost, health insurance cost increases for next year. And finally, they modified the career ladder. So you probably heard there was a lot of buzz about the career ladder, but essentially just to boil that down to the nuts and bolts of it, they're modifying the career ladder in a way to provide additional funding to districts. And again, we don't tie what we compensate or pay teachers to that funding, but we certainly welcome it because it does help provide additional funding to the district. So as I mentioned, more funding for additional students is a big part of that 4%. We will not be participating in that. Also, not necessarily directly tied to the general fund. The state looks at this as additional general fund funding, but they will continue to fund the increase for the literacy initiative. So for Blaine County School District, where that used to mean it was right around 140, 150,000, that is now a $300,000 line item for us. So again, we certainly welcome that. What does this mean for Blaine County School District? The district's expecting about a 2.6% drop in enrollment from the budget from this year to next year. So we'll see how that actually translates into dollars, but we know that the funding per student that I just talked about and all those little mechanisms in the funding formula will be muted and may even not quite cover the loss in revenue. In addition, there is no public conversation about the 2021 budget holdback as of this time when I put this together. As mentioned, we're hoping to have some kind of answers this week. So we've got our fingers crossed. We've been, as a group of business managers, hounding the State Department Finance Group, who's, I'm sure, passing that up the line to the governor, that we're in the midst of negotiations and creating budgets, and we really need to know this information. So understanding and making adjustments sooner is certainly more preferable than making adjustments later when it's difficult when you have contracts that are in place. So non-financial legislative items that I'll just throw out there that were in the mix, if you will, that were either not resolved or postponed or resolved. So the bill that would reduce the school levy election days of May down to May and November by eliminating the March and August dates, that did not pass. The bill that invoked the 11-month cooling period after a bond levy election, that also did not pass. And the school employees, the bill that allowed school employees to carry firearms in schools, that actually failed. So the others didn't pass because they didn't come for a full vote, but the school employees carrying firearms bill was actually voted down. So now I'm going to change directions and just talk for just a couple minutes on the plant facilities. And the next page down, it looks at the debt issues associated with the debt that we currently have in place. And you can see that there were 5 of them. Each of them have a earmark associated with the year that they were issued. And you can see the interest rate that we're paying on it, for a total collective of $27.2 million. When we look at the next page down and we look at the principal payments associated with that $27.2 million, I'm delighted to say that we have one payment left, and that will be our August 1st, 2020 payment. You can see the amounts associated with each of the 5 bond issues that we have for a collective of $5.44 million. Now I'm asking in our budget for $5.44 million, it'll be less because how this works is we don't pay off bonds in each of those dates that you see of August 1st of 2016 to 2019. What we do is we make a payment into a sinking fund, and then those dollars sit idle earning interest. And then when the final payment is made in August 1st of 2020, we will then retire all of those bonds. So the funds of each of the 4 previous payments of $5.4 million each have been earning interest since 2016. So that'll help diminish that net principal payment. But until we know what that amount is when we get into August, then rather than try to be cute and try to dial in some kind of guess number, I'm just going to ask for $5.4 million that was originally slated to be paid. Also, we will have one more on the next page down, debt interest payment. And again, that'll be August 1st of 2020. And you can see that's about $675,000. The federal government, as part of the previous stimulus package that when we talked about shovel-ready jobs going back to the ARRA or ERA stimulus funding, as a result of that, the federal government will pay about 90% of that $674,000, assuming that the Congress does put that in the budget for next year. So we're very close to retiring our debt, and we have one payment for our principal and one payment for our interest that'll be remaining. And maybe the most interesting part of this entire presentation is probably this last page, which looks at the plant facilities revenues and expenses projection for next year. Next year, as we talked about earlier, we will not have that levy. Those dollars will retire at the end of this year. The last payment associated with that will come in July. We will book that in June so that it will actually be a 1920 fiscal revenue entry, even though we'll receive those dollars in July, which would normally be associated with the following following school and fiscal year. So we will be budgeting no revenue dollars. However, we will be carrying over roughly, I'm just estimating, about $11.5 million from our current year into next year. So that's a big chunk of money, but like we just talked about, 5.4 million roughly, and debt interest of about 50,000. We're looking at about 5.5 million. Some of that will be reduced, as I mentioned, about interest that has been earned. But if we take a look at our facilities budget of 1.3, retain that as a whole amount, just like the 1 million for technology that we have done in the past, certainly the 4 years that I've been here. When we look at all of those numbers collectively, it's about 7.7 million, 7.8 million. So we will chew into that carryover of 11.5 by about, let's just call it 7.8 million, at least as budgeted. Often we will budget for facilities of 1.3. Sometimes we don't hit the full 1.3. Sometimes we come in a little less than that. And so if that's the case, then we might have a little additional money to roll over into the following year. But you can see here that even budgeting the numbers that we have at the full allocations as in previous years been budgeted, we still anticipate for the 21-22 year, so not next year, but the year after that, we do anticipate having some residual funds that could help pay for the project that we had talked about earlier over at the Wood River Middle School, that boiler project, or if we had to extend those funds into that year to help cover for the lack of a levy, that we would have at least some capacity to do that. So that's a lot of material. I said I was going to keep it short, or probably longer than I thought, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
The bottom line is, although you can't tell us how we clearly are going to have less revenue in the coming year for various reasons than we had in this year.
That's correct.
And that doesn't even take into consideration what additional holdbacks the governor may impose.
That's correct, yeah. The loss of the supplemental levy certainly ensures that we will have fewer revenue dollars in the general fund next year than we have this year. Then we put on top of that the aspect of fewer students. We add on top of that the aspect of COVID-19 eroding the ability of our taxpayers to pay their full property tax bills. And then on top of that, we put the governor's potential holdback, which again is probably likely, but unannounced at this point. So we have certainly multiple waves of reductions that will be impacting our budget, general fund budget, and facilities next year.
Thank you. Any other questions of Brian?
I think Trustee Stones has her hand raised.
Oh,
I keep trying.
Trustee Stone, go ahead.
With the economic downturn, would there be an expectation of student enrollment possibly going down as a result of that? Is that what happened the last time?
Yes, that did happen in the 2008, I'll call it the 2008 recession, because actually, 2008-9 was, for school districts tend to be usually a year behind. So the rest of the world is going through their motions and dealing with the impacts associated with their budgets, and the school districts are usually that 1 year behind. So it really didn't impact school districts until 2009-10. But looking at that time period, many districts ended up losing enrollment, and Blaine County certainly participated in that. That's a good question. We've sort of kicked this one around a bit and decided to stick with the numbers that we had, simply because we had been gone quite a ways down the budgeting path. If this thing ends earlier than I'll just say sooner rather than later, certainly that means that it'll have less of a residual impact on families' ability to stay and remain with where they're currently domiciled. But as this goes on, it certainly has that impact of families needing to move in, with grandma, grandpa, or other family members to make their essentially be able to make their bills and be able to get by. So We do know of a couple of families that have moved to, and I think we talked about them earlier, maybe the Jerome or the Gooding area, just a handful. But that is a good question, and that certainly that could have an impact.
What was the scale of that drop in the 2008, 2009 recession? Do you have any numbers or percentages or anything like that of how many students we lost at that time?
Yeah, you know, I do have that information. Unfortunately, it's on my drive at work, and I don't have access to that. But you know, it was. I want to ballpark it around 100 students. It certainly could have been more.
Okay.
Now, you know, that was an event that took place over multiple years. Hopefully, this is going to be just a couple of months. Now, with that being said, it is really difficult to forecast because we don't have any kind of data in the past that we can point to give as a guideline on how this will unfold moving forward. You know, in some ways, good old-fashioned business recession is just so much more. We have data on that. We can at least forecast a little. I think a little better. I just feel like we're throwing darts blindfolded at the wall.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think one of the things that'll be important for us to pay attention to is how strong is our summer season. If it comes back strong quickly, then we'll lose less families. If it's not strong, families will be looking elsewhere for work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Brian? Thanks again, Brian. At this point, I will entertain a motion. I believe we're ready to go into executive session. Pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-2061A, F, and J. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those
Aye.
opposed, ayes have it. Before we all get out of this session, do we have a good idea of how we're getting into the executive session? Apparently, we've got a second invitation. Is that right?
We have a second invitation, and then we'll be back and rejoin this one afterwards.
Do we sign out of this one, the little red box?
Yes, you do.
Yes.
Goodbye.
And then
See you on the other side.
I'll stay in this meeting in case you want to join again.
What little red box have we got? How are we getting out? There we go.
Brooke, are they expecting you over in the closed executive session?
Hi, Ben. I move Hi, Vicki and I made it. I need a couple more people to vote. Oh, thank you for waiting for us. Oh, Kelly's in. And Keith. Nice. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Kelly.
I got in.
Hey,
I've never had problems getting in, so.
that's good. Looks like Keith made it too. Does that mean we have enough to vote to get out?
No, we need a quorum.
Well, that's
I guess 3 of us is a quorum, isn't it?
yes, with Keith would be enough. Keith, we can't hear you, but we can kind of tell you're on. There he is.
Hear me now?
I move adjourn.
Oh, we need the motion on Silverback first.
Oh, right.
Keith present?
I move. Wait, we lost Keith. Damn. Oh, Keith's on. I mean, a list.
I see his initials are there, but he's not.
Yeah, and his mic's off again. Keith, we can't hear you if you're there.
Here we go. All right.
There you are. Nice.
Here I am. Okay,
Okay.
so we need a motion to instruct our attorney to negotiate with Silverback to pay us
Up front.
assume their average $5. We will offer to sell our copyright for an amount that our attorney thinks is appropriate. And as part of that agreement, we will have free use of their products. Somebody want to
So
make the
moved.
motion?
Yeah.
So
So,
moved.
Vicky is here. Did you get that down, Vicky? Vicky?
You're on mute, Vicky.
her mic's off, so we can't hear.
Writing it down as you're speaking.
There we go. Can you hear us?
Yes, and I'm writing this down as you're speaking.
Oh, all right, good. All right. So if somebody would like to make that motion,
So moved.
I'll
all
second.
right, second?
A second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing
No.
none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Kelly, did you vote?
Yes, I said aye.
All
And I
right,
did.
and I vote aye as well, so the motion carries. Now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
And move we adjourn.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Chair votes with the ayes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Vicki.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to
Thanks,
you
Tom.
soon. And Thank you, Ben.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for all your help today.
Yeah.
Happy first meeting, Vicky.
Thanks. I'm on my third computer, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Good night.